Okay. Hey everybody. This is Brady for the Land Grant Gauntlet, coming at you live on Periscope, Twitter, and whatever you're watching this on. I just want to welcome everybody coming in. This is the 5th Periscope that we've done thus far, and it's just kind of thought came to my head earlier today that to those that have been following the Periscope account since the beginning, or if you've just caught on in the middle, you may not know a lot about me, which, I mean, I don't blame you. I'm not that important. But I guess I'll just talk about myself for a little bit so you get a better feel for me, and that way we can let some people join in later on so I don't just jump right into the topics for today's Periscope. Welcome, P. Dovry 12. Thanks for the love. Well, again, my name is Brady Trantham. You can follow me at Brady Does Sports on Twitter. Go there for some Big 12 tweets, sports tweets, college football tweets. I also am the editor for a website called Thunder Digest. We cover the Oklahoma City Thunder, so just general sports tweets, fun. I usually follow back. I always try to reply, so if you're ever interested, just give me a follow and we can hang out and chat and talk about sports or movies or whatever. I'm from Oklahoma, and I live right now in Norman. I graduated from the University of Oklahoma, which is why you'll see things like this in my room. But don't let that fool you. I'm going to cover the entire Big 12, not just OU. It's a little easier for me, obviously, to get out OU news and inside information. Sometimes I get lucky, a little bit more than some of our other writers that may not live in the area or have followed OU for that long. But everyone with the website they're all very, very good, and we have a very well-balanced taking on the entire conference, so don't just expect nothing but OU stuff from me. I did get to go to the spring game on Saturday at OU. Welcome, James Manter. Thanks for joining. I did get to go to the OU spring game on Saturday, and like that has always happened. It's always happened to me. I got my first, can't really tell anymore, I got my first sunburn at the game of the year. It's always my first sunburn of the year. And it was an interesting game, but we'll talk about that later. You like what you see, Patrick? Anyway, yeah, so I graduated from OU in 2014. After that, I started writing for what was called Thunder Obsessed and now is called Thunder Digest a few months later. It really got my feet wet in the world of sports media and sports writing, and I found out that I actually really enjoyed it. And a few months later, I had a friend who wrote for the Land Grant Gauntlet, and I just asked him on Twitter one day, you guys looking for any more writers? And I got to join. And so anybody out there that's has a desire to write or put your get your word out there, your opinion, just don't be afraid to ask anybody, because websites like us and I know Cowboys Ride for Free, I believe, tweeted out today that they were looking for some writers. So don't be afraid to ask anybody if you have the desire to write. I didn't know I did in college until a few months later, like I said, after I graduated. So you may have that talent inside of you right now, and you may just not know it, but just don't be afraid to ask. But yeah, been doing this for about 2 years, going on my first year with the Land Grant Gauntlet. I've enjoyed every minute of it. This conference, as fun as it is to watch, is even more fun to talk about, write about. the excitement, the players, the coaches, the personalities. Welcome, Rob Torres, 77. The the personalities, the explosive offenses, the great players and traditions. It's just a hell of a conference to follow. Doesn't get as much pub nationally as I think it should, or as much love, but we'll see with this upcoming season how well the Big 12 can do. I think they can do pretty well, obviously, but they made a great deal of improvement perception-wise with OU making the playoff. Now OU did their sadly their usual thing, and they didn't get destroyed in the Orange Bowl, but it wasn't the score didn't look pretty, let's just say. So the next step for the Big 12, obviously, is to not only make it to the playoff, but make a greater dent in the playoff, possibly win it. He's going to be up there, Baker Mayfield. He's going to be up there for the Heisman talk, preseason-wise. That's probably what kept him from at least going to New York last year, was that he didn't get any preseason hype. I mean, and obviously so. He was a walk-on from Texas Tech that no one really thought could play at the level that he ended up playing. And even I did. At the beginning of the year, I was not a Baker Mayfield fan, but it took me only a game and a half to say, this guy's it. This guy is the man for OU. But with the preseason hype, preseason accolades, All-American teams, award watch lists, if he can keep up the play that he had last year, he will definitely at least make it to New York. Will he win it? I don't know. That's going to have to do a lot more with OU's team success and not just him. If OU is undefeated or has one loss but still going to win the conference, you can probably bet the farm that Baker Mayfield's going to be in New York for the Heisman ceremony. But other than that, over the weekend was actually kind of a huge college football news cycle that had happened. Welcome, Chillum. Thank you for joining. The NCAA released 3 new, I guess, a combination of rules, regulations, deregulations, lack thereof, and a moratorium. That's a new word for me. But the first one we'll talk about was probably the most controversial. It was the banning of satellite camps, and this has already been talked about for a. How old am I? We'll get to that later. The banning of satellite camps. It's been talked about a lot since the ruling came out on Saturday, I believe, or Friday night. I can't exactly remember. I talked about it for a little bit during the spring game Periscope that I put out on Saturday. But basically, no more. There will be no more satellite camps. Obviously, coaches will not be able to go outside their immediate region location to set up sponsorship camps so they could see recruits that they would otherwise probably not have the ability to see on such a regular basis. I found it interesting that out of the all Power 5 schools, a lot of people are going to blame this on the SEC bias, the SEC complaining. They were the most vocal about not wanting to have satellite camps, and for obvious reasons. If you just use your brain, duh. They don't want Jim Harbaugh or lived in Norman for about 5 years. It's a good town. I like it. Big enough to have fun in, small enough that you don't feel like you're in such a huge crowded city. Although at times, just like anywhere else you might live, you get tired of it after a while. But at the end of the day, I love living here. It's a beautiful place to live. But as I was saying on the satellite camps, SEC coaches, they're not going to want Jim Harbaugh, or Urban Meyer, or some other random big-time coach. I bet. I've got family in Dallas, and I go down there from time to time and have a blast. But yeah, I'm kind of a small town guy, I guess. Even though Norman's not necessarily a small town, it's pretty big. But yeah, Dallas is way too big for me. But yeah, SEC coaches they're not going to want big time coaches from out of conference to be able to have such easy access to recruits in their location. But the interesting thing that I found out was that out of all Power 5 schools, only the Big Ten was opposed to this NCAA banning, and that makes sense. Because like I said earlier, a lot of people are blaming this on the SEC, but the Big 12 voted for the banning of satellite camps, the Pac-12, the ACC, and if you really stop and think about it, it makes sense. I mean, schools like USC or Oklahoma State, Clemson, Florida State, their recruits, their top 10, top 150, top 200 recruits just in their backyard alone. That's not to say that there aren't welcome olive trees and Grace and Parks. Grace and Parks, yeah. Thank you guys for joining. Yeah, that's not to say that there aren't a ton of recruits up north. It's just I guess, is it in the best interest of the players though? And that's where it just kind of gets down to an opinion. I don't think it's in the players' best interest. And that's just because it's taking away from their experience as a high school recruit. But at the end of the day, if you're a huge recruit, and that's going to be an absolute minority percentage of every single high school football senior that's wanting to join. Welcome, Josh Reyes. Thanks for joining. You're a fun follow on Twitter. Unless you're in that percentile of a recruiting list, you're going to get your pick of whatever school you want to go visit and see. Now, the rest of them is what this ruling does actually affect. The players that are either overlooked, not evaluated correctly by recruiting services, which that happens way more than it actually should be, or should, considering the recruiting hype that a lot of these websites have. But yeah, the overlooked players are not going to get a chance in Texas, in a small town in Texas, they're probably not going to get a chance to meet Jim Harbaugh or Urban Meyer. So in that instance, it's not in the player's best interest. But at the end of the day, it was on 107.7 The Franchise in Oklahoma City. They were talking about it over the weekend, and Anthony Fogel, broadcaster on the radio station, said that it could possibly has the possibility to open up shady recruiting, and that's hearsay. There's going to be shady recruiting regardless. Just because satellite banning is in effect now, it doesn't mean that there's going to be a breakdown of shady recruiting. It's going to still occur. It reeks of SEC coaches being vocal about not wanting this to happen. The fact that the SEC had a rule stipulating that coaches in the conference couldn't do it, and even Kevin Sumlin, the head coach at Texas A&M, well, that'd be interesting. Harbaugh for NCAA president. And that's what I was going to say. Mark D'Antonio had said abuse brings control, and that's what I was going to say as my main point as to why this actually happened. It's the NCAA just trying to wave their gavel and say that they're in control here. The second they lose control, the more of a joke they look like, the more of the joke they are perceived to be as a ruling body, the more they'll look like that. Welcome Emily Denham. Hope I'm pronouncing that right. Thanks for joining. The NCAA is a money-making business. A lot of their rules, a lot of their philosophy is made fun of ad nauseum. So not a lot of time to get into that. You all know, if you follow college football, you know how much of a joke they can be. The second that they lose an opportunity to make a ton of money is when they'll crack down on something. And this was, I thought, just their way of saying we're in control here. If this is going to happen, it needs to be regulated through us. And that's what I thought happened. I don't agree with it, but at the end of the day, I don't think it's going to make that big of an effect on recruiting. Players are still going to get looks everywhere. The majority of players are going to get taken up by the bigger schools, and of course, there's always going to be your Marshall Faulk that goes to San Diego State or San Diego State or San Jose State. I believe it was San Diego State. Welcome, Josie Lynn. Thanks for joining. Or you're always going to have Jerry Rice coming from Mississippi Valley State. You know, that's always going to happen, but that's what... Thank you, Patrick. It was San Diego State. Welcome, Adrian __1999 __. Thanks for joining. You're always going to have... Hola. You're always going to have big-time players coming from smaller schools, and I think that's what kind of makes college sports a blast to watch and follow. But enough on the satellite banning. That's been talked about a ton. Another thing that the NCAA brought down was the deregulation of electronic communication. And as an OU fan, alum, this is actually kind of funny because about 10 years ago, there was a basketball coach here by the name of Kelvin Sampson who was let go by the school for texting recruits too much. Welcome, Reem93. Thanks for joining. Yeah, Kelvin Sampson was actually fired for texting recruits too much. And again, that was back in 2005, 2006. Yes, I am. I am up. That was back in 2005, 2006. Smartphones were just starting to hit mainstream. And obviously 10 years later, I think it's just a way of the NCAA just realizing that they cannot keep up with the times. Communication nowadays is so simple. Just a few clicks of a few buttons, and you have made a complete conversation with somebody. So for the NCAA to try and regulate texting and tweeting when it can come in so many forms, whether, you know, a coach could just make some fake Twitter account, and if he really wanted to slide in your DMs, like Patrick's saying, they could do that. So I kind of agree with this. Now, Matt Turney, one of our writers, he, if you want more information on the subject, he wrote a good piece on the deregulation of electronic communication on the land-grant gauntlet. And in it, he had put a quote from Urban Meyer, who was, I guess, opposed to it. He had said that, you know, that it may not even be a coach. It could be an intern. And now we're going to have people with, excuse me, phones just flooded with X thousand amounts of text messages. And I don't really see why he's against it. I don't see why any coach would be against it at all. What's stopping, or what's so bad about texting people a zillion times a day? Obviously, I mean, it is annoying, but I mean, we see pictures all the time of recruits, and he doesn't have a really good track record with players obeying the law, but not all of them are criminals, let's be honest. But I mean, we see pictures all the time of these recruits sitting in bathtubs filled with letters from different schools. So it's not like they haven't been flooding these poor recruits with, hey, come play for us, information for forever. So this is going to happen. This is just the NCAA realizing that there is absolutely no way they can police this 24/7 all the time and get the results that they want. So it's kind of a duh decision in my brain. But yeah. Welcome, Robin Caleb 35. Thanks for joining. And then the last thing, and this is probably the most, like, yes, you got this right, decision over the weekend, and it was the NCAA shutting down the adding of bowl games for the next 3 years. The word that was used was a moratorium, and I've never heard that word before, so yes, thank God. Basically, there will be no new bowls until 2019, until I guess the issue will be revisited. Welcome UDSB. Thanks for joining. The cities that it affects are going to be, yeah, they don't, it just depends on your point of view, how much they get right or wrong. The cities that this affects immediately are Austin, Myrtle Beach, and Charleston, South Carolina, because they were applying for bowl membership. Right now, there are 41 bowl games. There's the 2 playoff games with the national championship. You have the New Year's Six. That's probably a good, needing to be 7-5 to be bowl eligible. That's probably a good idea. I would say 8 or 9 wins. I personally think there should be 20 because you have the 2 playoff games with the national championship, the New Year's Six, and then if you had 10 more bowl games to award the 8 and 9 win 9 win schools, it would just, the bowls would hold more water. They'd be more important. They'd be more, I think, viewership would be up. You wouldn't see schools just tanking in these bowl games because, I mean, with the BCS, and obviously I grew up in the 90s and in the early 2000s, so my idea of college football was the BCS. And from what I've heard from people older than me, like my dad or whoever else, the BCS really killed the bowl season in terms of, you know, the Sun Bowl, the small bowls, the Sun Bowl, the, can't even think of any right now, the Holiday Bowl. At times they were pretty big events for schools that otherwise weren't necessarily in bowl games year in and year out. But now, I mean, I read a stat on the article on ESPN.com that last year, 63% of the 128 FBS schools made bowl games. And if that is too much math for you, I'll put it to you this way. In the previous 45 years, only 4 teams with losing records have ever made bowl games. 45 years, 4 teams with losing records. I remember right now 3 just last year that were 5-7. And then there were a few, or was it 3 or 2? And then there were a few that were 6-6. And that to me just, it ruins the fun. Yes, everybody probably has a chance to end their season with a trophy. I've never heard that before. What day are the semifinals next year? I believe they're on New Year's again? Or New Year's Eve? I hope not. Welcome Miller's 22. Yeah, so yes, everybody probably has the opportunity to end their season with a trophy. That to me just is so weak. It's so weak. These bowl games are all about making money for sponsors, corporations, the NCAA. So they're always going to get added. It's like the argument that you know that this is going to come, where NFL jerseys are going to have sponsorship logos tattooed all over their jerseys, just like European football teams have. It's going to happen because what owner is going to say no to more money? What ruling body like the NCAA is going to say no to more money? Now, obviously, they put a hold on adding bowl games because they've realized that this is a little silly that this amount of average teams have got into bowl games. So they're going to do something about it. Hopefully, I don't see them cutting down bowl games. I'd like for them to do it, but who knows? We can only hope. Anyway, there was another spring game actually on Saturday. The University of Kansas had their spring game. They're coming off an amazing winless season, bless their hearts. They just got the #1 recruit in the nation in basketball, so I'm sure they're happy. Houston, September 3rd. Yes, OU opens up the season against the Houston Cougars. That'll be a great matchup. Welcome, Jane Hattie. Thanks for joining. Did they score? Did they score? Who are you talking about? Yep. A lot of brown shoes. Anyway, the Kansas spring game, I didn't get to see it. Obviously, wasn't on TV anywhere. I just read about it on ESPN. From what I read, the QB battle is going to remain undecided. Yes, surprisingly, KU did score in their spring game. The final score was 49-42. And there were some pretty good plays, explosive plays, and there is some optimism coming out of the spring game for Kansas fans. Their quarterback battle is going to probably remain undecided going into fall camp and possibly even the first few games of the year. Montel Cozart, who was the starter for the remainder of the year, no, I'm not. He was the starter for the remainder of the year last year. He had a terrible day statistically. He threw 3 interceptions, no touchdowns. He will probably get the majority of first-team snaps considering his experience. But redshirt freshman Carl Stanley had a touchdown, 1 interception, and went 12 of 22 for 117 yards. Obviously, that's probably the best-looking stat line in the spring game. Anytime you don't have a clear-cut winner at the quarterback position, you're always going to go, in my opinion, you always want to go with someone that just takes care of the football, because in that way you can depend on a running game and you can depend on a defense to make a few stops here and there. Otherwise, if you hand over the reins to a guy with more experience but turns the ball over a ton, you're just giving yourself less of an opportunity to even think about winning a game. Welcome, Courtney 2010. Let's see, what else do we have here? The biggest and most optimistic thing to come out of the spring game for Kansas was, and I'm going to try my best to pronounce this, it's Laquavante Gonzalez. He's a Texas A&M transfer. He was a highly recruited guy out of high school, and he took a short crossing route, 61 yards for a touchdown. He just basically outran the Kansas defense. So that's going to be another transfer from A&M, but yeah. Sumlin's his aura, whatever he had from Manziel and then creaming OU in the Cotton Bowl in 2012, that has completely worn off. Kyle Allen transferring to Houston, Kyler Murray transferring to OU, and Laquavante Gonzalez, who looked like a really, really good player in the spring game. Landry. It wasn't all Landry's fault. Landry Jones, for those that don't know. I'll get to OU's prediction in a little bit, Josh. I'm sorry. Let me finish with the Kansas thing. But yeah, with Kansas football, you want to have something to hold on to, and Gonzalez looks like the type of guy that can be an exciting, explosive player for their offense. Other than that, it's just a whole bunch of the usual. Thanks for the love. It's just a whole bunch of the usual. The running game is stagnant. The defense is a little on the slow side. David Beatty I don't want to say he's in over his head, because he seems like a guy that understands how to win at Kansas. He did coach under Mark Mangino, and he understands what it takes to win in a place like Lawrence for football. But in terms of how much money do they owe past coaches, I don't know. They're still chucking out checks to Charlie Weiss. Personally, I don't think they should have got rid of Mark Mangino, but that's just me. Anyway, with Kansas, just grab onto something. I hope you guys win a game this year. Anyway, the other spring game was the one that I went to in OU. And it was a really, really weird, boring game. And spring games are boring here and there a lot of the times, but not only were there weren't a lot of players playing, Samaje Perine didn't play. He's still recovering from his off-season ankle surgery. Who else didn't play? I can't remember who else didn't play off the top of my head. But other than that, the first-team guys on offense could not get tackled by the first-team guys on defense. So there wasn't a ton to take away from the day in terms of skill position guys. Now, who starts at middle linebacker? That Jordan Evans is the main returning starter, even though he's more of an outside guy. It just really depends on the scheme that OU is going to run, 3-4 or 4-3. They flirt with trying to go back to the 4-3. What they've recruited over the last few years has been 3-4 guys. So it just really depends on what works, I guess, on who plays where and what position. But while there wasn't tackling, there was still hitting. And in the trenches, it was full contact. You know, you can't fake that. And OU's defensive line, considering that they didn't have Charles Walker, who really came on last year and is probably going to get a lot of all-conference pub, and possibly if he remains consistent, could sneak onto some All-American teams. He's probably going to jump ship at the end of this year to the NFL, and trust me, he's good enough to do it. They also didn't have Devontae Lampkin, who also was recovering from a light surgery. But considering all that, the defensive line looked very, very good, considering the jump that they made last year when they had absolutely zero hype going into the season. I don't think it's going to be a weakness for the OU defense. It could end up being a strength. The obvious strength is going to be the secondary. The linebackers are still a question mark. I didn't really leave the spring game confident with the linebacking performance. They're still waiting on the arrival of Caleb Kelly, the Big 12's only 5-star recruit this past recruiting season. He'll attend OU in the fall. He wasn't an early enrollee. Defensively, as a whole, if the linebackers can catch on quickly, OU has a really good chance to be in the top 5 all year when they have their bigger games against OSU, Baylor. They play TCU and Texas towards the beginning of the year. Offensively, there was no tackling again, so there wasn't a lot you could tell from Joe Mixon runs. I mean, we all know what Joe Mixon can do. Who starts at the other corner? I think Dakota Austin. He was really consistent, and I think he was a little bit better than Zach Sanchez last year. I expect him to start and do well opposite Jordan Thomas. Offensively, we all know what Joe Mixon can do. Samaje Perine can do. Rodney Anderson, the third-string guy at running back, played really well. He was the number 1 running back out of Texas a few years ago. He tore his MCL, or his ACL, against Tennessee last year on a kickoff return, and he showed no ill effects from that injury. He'll be a good change of pace for whenever Mixon and Perine are just tired, or if one of them has to miss some time with a minor injury. OU's running backs are going to be fine. Baker Mayfield did his thing. He had control of the offense. It seems like he's developing a really good chemistry with tight end / wide receiver Mark Andrews. They had a few big third down conversions over the middle. So if Andrews can just step into that role that Sterling Shepard had, in meaning that he becomes a complete safety net for Mayfield, OU's offense should be fine. Yeah, it's been a while since OU's had a good tight end. Offensive line looks great. Orlando Brown is going to be possibly an All-American. He looks the part. He plays the part. If he just cuts down on the false starts, he had way too many to count last year. He was a redshirt freshman starting for the first time. Welcome, Sarah Lizzie 94. Thanks for joining. he was a redshirt freshman starting for the first time, so you can cut him some slack. But he looked great. There were a few plays that I just kind of eyeballed him, and he was pulling, going full speed, and running right into OU safety Stephen Parker, who is much smaller than him. Let's just say, I wouldn't want to be, on defense looking at this guy coming at me at full speed. But in terms of a prediction, I don't want to go too quickly, but since you asked, Josh, I will. I guess I'll go ahead and predict. At this point, I just can't see OU beating Ohio State, and even though the game's in Norman, and that's just mainly because of how good I think Urban Meyer is as a coach. And yes, they lost about 8,000 players to the NFL, but Urban Meyer recruits, and he has guys waiting in the wings right now, just waiting for their opportunity, and they're still going to have JT Barrett at quarterback. Mike Stoops struggles against mobile quarterbacks. The fact that it's in Norman gives me some confidence, but because we don't necessarily have a set-in-stone receiving core, a set-in-stone linebacking core at this point, I just don't see it right now. But the good thing with OU's schedule is we'll know real quickly how good they are. They play Houston to start the year at NRG Stadium on a neutral site. And if OU dominates that game, I'll have a much better outlook on the Ohio State game. We saw how Houston just destroyed Florida State in the Peach Bowl. Houston has talent, and they have swagger right now. So we'll see. Basically, my prediction for OU won't probably come until a few weeks before the season. But since you asked, Josh, I'll say lose to Ohio State and lose on the road in Lubbock to Texas Tech. They get payback against Baker Mayfield. I'm just going to assume that's going to be a night game. He asked, and that's just off the top of my head. So yeah, 10-2. I would think that would probably have OU winning the Big 12. I don't know about jumping back into the playoff. They might be left out if they're 10-2 losing to Ohio State. But yeah, other than that, there was actually a lot of news this week, and there was a lot to talk about. I've been talking for about 36 minutes. So if you've been on for the entire Periscope, thank you for listening to my voice. But anyway, I enjoyed it. It was fun. Just check out the Land Grant Gauntlet, guys. I hope you guys have enjoyed the new layout. I certainly have. It's really easy to navigate. Everything is just right there on the front page. It's a lot of fun. The writers are great. The content is great. It's consistent. It's a lot of fun to be a part of, and I want you guys, and we at the Land Grant Gauntlet, we want all of you guys to be a part of it. Just ask us questions, tweet us, if you just have a random thought. Comment on our articles if you think we're completely stupid or if we're completely right. Just let us know about it. And it's not just for us to boost our ego, boost our viewership. It's just so that we let you guys understand that you're very much a part of this. This is college football, and it's the most passionate sport in America. And without fan viewership, fan interaction, it wouldn't be as fun. So just come on in, join the ride, and enjoy it. We'll enjoy it. But other than that, everybody, I'm going to go watch the rest of this Thunder Spurs game that I think they're losing right now. Anyway, I had fun, guys. Have a great night.